Well, I strongly support this set of amendments, my lords, in the name of my noble friend, and particularly the one where the noble Lady Baroness Scott requires the asylum provisions to be implemented immediately upon the passage of the bill. So I congratulate her, who by gripping this is demonstrating the urgency of the situation we find ourselves in direct contrast, I might say, to the ponderous approach from a government that appears to give greater weight to the process of international law than the well-being of our settled populations. Now, my lords, this is an infrastructure bill, and I want to alight on a simple truth, that hotels are an essential part of an area's economic infrastructure. Their importance exceeds the turnover of the business and the payroll for the cooks and cleaners behind the scenes and the front-of-house staff, and hotels accommodate more than weekend tourists. They enable commercial travellers to visit distant customers. They provide shelter for tradesmen working on local building sites away from the main base. They drive a huge multiplier effect in holiday hotspots and conference cities. Local restaurants, tourist attractions, coach operators, florists, artisan food chains all benefit. Hotels are a huge economic driver. But take away the liquidity in accommodation that hotels provide, then local economies are damaged. And especially in rural market towns, which might only be able to sustain a single coaching inn. And this is a matter of public interest. And in the pursuit of growth, it's a matter of national interest. So we cannot and must not carelessly allow the conversion of hotels into hostels after behind closed doors, under the counter deals between the Home Office and local landlords. I don't blame the hotel owners for entertaining these blandishments, but we can't allow ourselves to sleepwalk into a situation where these decisions, a connivance between the Home Office and the investors behind the hotels, are taken over the heads of local people whose justifiable concerns are swept aside and airbrushed away. That just will not do. A friend of mine has operated a small seaside hotel with 29 rooms, and she's been offered £40,000 a month, 12 months of the year, for 3 years, in aggregate £1.5 million, for a property that might otherwise have achieved £500,000 at best at auction, and then been offered a fully expensed refurbishment at the end, whilst firing all her staff in the meantime, which were already costing more because of the national insurance increases. She's not taken the bait, but others have. And the contracts and values here are madness. They're economically illiterate. It's distorting whole economies with perverse incentives, and these deals are being done right under our noses. But the conversion, as my noble friend Lord Banner has said, from a hotel into a hostel isn't just planning semantics. People staying in hostels have no freedom to choose their accommodation. They stay for months, not days. They're required to check in with a commissar each night. They share rooms with people they don't know. They don't pay the bill. They have nothing to do but wait. And there are many other differences between them.
I'm grateful to the noble lord for giving way. Does he feel a sense of humility, given that by 2023, a peak of 400 asylum hotels had been reached under the last government?
Can I stand up and say, and by June 24, that had gone down to 213, and the number of asylum seekers at the moment are 2,500 more in these hotels than they were when the government changed.
So I will answer your question quite directly, because this is an unsatisfactory state of affairs. But the points I have just made and
will the noble lord, wait for 1 second, to clarify the point? In particular, the argument before us is that some hotels in some places are not suitable for asylum seekers. The last Conservative government recognised this point and closed the Bell Hotel in Epping in April 2024. I know because I asked them to do so. They did so, taking into account the opinions and sensitivities of local people which have been ignored by the current government.
Since the noble lady provokes me to return to the question, does the noble lord agree that there were 400 hotels in use for asylum seekers in 2023, and that the reduction which took place was met with no change in asylum law that enabled the new government to address the situation in a constructive way?
Well, I'm grateful for my noble friends for answering some of the technical questions for me. I wasn't aware of the numbers, but I'm better apprised now. But the point I was trying to make is twofold. Number one, I'm trying to draw out the distinction between a hotel and a hostel and an HMO. And in so doing, I'm only repeating arguments that were made in the judgment that was referred to by my noble friend, the interim injunction in the case of the Bell Hotel in Epping. So the noble lord may wish to sort of throw mud in my eyes, but I'm only repeating the authorised judgment of the Court of Appeal, the points that were raised there, and I take no criticism for doing so. It's a matter of public record, and there are many learned friends in this House, including my noble friend sitting to the side of me, and if I've erred in what I have just said, I'm sure they will come up. But the point is, and the noble lord gives me the opportunity to say so, that the movement of a hotel into a hostel is a material change of use for the reasons I just gave. The people who are staying there aren't the sort of guests who pay their way and there for a few days. These are people who are mandated to be there by the state, and that's the point we need to make. And that's a material change of use. It's plain and simple. There's no denying it. And as we've just heard from my noble friend, the planning system exists to regulate not just those changes in use, but to arbitrate between the private interests of the hotel owner and the public interest. And my lords, let's be clear, there's no denying the public interest in this matter. So I want to make the distinction between the interim... Moving on. I want to make the distinction between the interim provision of accommodation for helping whole family units get back on their feet and the circumstance where that situation morphs in the building into the provision of bedrooms for single, mostly male, economic migrants. Now, for the conversion of a hotel to a HMO for the use of family groups is a bit of a lottery that shape shifts with time. Now, there are areas where a hotel might be converted to an HMO under permitted development rules, and that's common, and thence separately from an HMO into a hostel. And I want to paint a picture where a hotel has been converted into an HMO for family groups with the consent under permitted development, but then without notice flipped into a hostel when the HMO Home Office decides to ship and disperse families out and moved in single, unrelated migrants. Now, this isn't just a theoretical possibility. It nearly happened in Diss, in South Norfolk, where I used to be the leader. Now, in that town, a whole generation ago, arms were outstretched to welcome the Vietnamese boat people. And demonstrating that humility, under my leadership, the local council worked to welcome the largest group of Ukrainians in our county. More recently, migrant families, again under my leadership, are settled into a hotel which has effectively become an HMO. Please do not suggest that I have any ulterior motive here. I have done my bit, not only that, but done my bit to smooth over some of the difficulties that certain people on social media and elsewhere have tried to do. You invite me to make these points. But in July just gone, and I'm no longer the leader now, I've taken my place in your lordship's house, the Home Office announced without notice that the families that had become settled would be dispersed. My lords, 42 children were going to be removed from the school roll just a few weeks before the start of the new school year, their families taken away from the local GP's practice, and the networks that they had created amongst themselves and with the local community, together with the infrastructure that had been wrapped around them. Again, my noble friend, something put in under the budget that I set, was to be removed. Now, no wonder local people were cross. They could see the injustice in that approach. If there was a crime, it was from the Home Office that thought that sort of behaviour was acceptable. But we were lucky, because it hadn't been 4 years since the families were initially welcomed. So the council was able to issue a stop notice to prevent the forced removal of these family groups. But elsewhere, the slippery slope from moving from hotel to hostel, a stop notice cannot be issued. And that's why I completely support the amendment that stops the limit on stop notices. So there's no sleepwalking into a system where a hotel drifts to an HMO and then to a hostel without due process. Because we should put local people at the heart of decision making and prevent those with an axe to grind from claiming that they do not have a say, which is the source of community tensions which we seek to stop. Because if they don't have their say, they should not just be smeared as far-right activists for expressing proper concerns. And this is a problem that has been created by national politicians, but local people need to be heard and part... Sorry.
You're going over the limit.
Given how much business we've still got to get through today, I wonder if the noble lord would very kindly just observe the advisory time that is given to speeches.
Grateful, but you will know that I was interrupted on more than one occasion, and I'm only in my last 50 words, so we're going to get there. Normally interventions from other parties don't count against the time, but I'll take advice from the clerks if necessary. So this is a problem created by national politicians, but local people need to be heard and be part of the solution, and to recognise that in this infrastructure bill above all, and we should be building the economic infrastructure and community spirit, and we don't do that by removing hotels from circulation.